Happy Tuesday morning, everybody. Welcome into another wonderful morning here on Morning JOX. Conrad Van Order, Damian Mitchell back with you today until 7 a.m. Appreciate you making us part of your morning each and every day here. And good to see Damian back. Had a nice extended weekend. Got to go spend some time with the fam. How's it feel being back, Damian? You nice and well rested?
I am indeed. It was cool, man. And just everything that happened over the weekend, as far as, especially here in the state of Alabama when it comes to recruiting, the conversations that people have with you, they're like, oh, so what do you think? What do you read in all this situation? And, some of the comments from, the Auburn side of things with Hugh Freeze and John Cohen and how they kind of responded, August 1st seems like a day that we need to keep an eye on. But on the Alabama side of things, they're just like, yeah, this is kind of what we expected, man. Like, it's going to sell itself. The A still means something. And the one thing I could not process, how Nick Saban still is involved in like recruiting and things. They're saying, Kalen DeBoer, he still got the help of Nick Saban. Well, if I have the help of the former coach that is probably one of the greatest, if not the greatest coach of all time, still helping me with my program, I don't necessarily think that's a knock. Like, there's no way you can spin it to say that that's a bad thing. If it helps, so be it. But I think Nick Saban has other things to worry about at this point. Like, the whole reason he's not coaching anymore is that he doesn't have to do all this stuff. And then when there's, recruits saying, like, we ain't talked to Nick Saban not one time. This is strictly what Kalen DeBoer has presented to us. This is his program. We enjoy this. And I think, on the other side of the state, it's just kind of, it's no need to really panic, but the optics of it all, and it just seems very uncomfortable to be in if you're an Auburn fan, because you kind of have to wait and see how this season goes. But it's also kind of on the other side of that, if it does not go well, then you look back at situations like this, the months like this of, oh, we should have seen the writing on the wall. It's just a very unusual situation to be in, but it's also kind of just the nature of the game in college athletics now.
Yeah, it certainly is. And if you're, like you said, if you're an Auburn fan, you're, the proof's kind of going to have to be in the pudding this year, it feels like, in terms of the product that's on the field, and whether that's, boosters that are waiting to, cash a check and sign a check off until they actually see, hey, we're headed in the right direction on the field, or people aren't happy with how often your coach plays golf, or whatever it is. Again, these are all things that, like you said, right now, the optics of it is not great. And until you win football games, people are going to latch on to it, right? Because it's an easy thing to do. It's just like, we brought up the comparison last year of what did we talk about during the Alabama football season, that it seems ridiculous now, but these were real conversations that we were having, 10 months ago about what Kalen DeBoer was wearing on a sideline, or what, treat the players were getting after practice, right? With the ice cream truck and things like that. And again, if you win, those things go away. Nobody cares about those things, right? But the second that you stop winning, those are the things that are going to be put under a microscope, and that's exactly what Auburn's going through on kind of a different level now. And like you said, there's a lot of people that want to point the finger and blame different things. And, is Nick Saban around the Alabama football program? Yeah, he has an office on campus. It's not next to Kalen DeBoer's or anything like that. It's in a different part of campus, but he's going to be around the program. That's part of it. And, it was very widely publicized that the reason, particularly that one weekend that he was meeting with a lot of recruits, it was because Kalen DeBoer and his staff were in Mississippi at a funeral for Keelan Russell's sister. And that's why Nick Saban was there kind of helping out back in Tuscaloosa with some of the recruits, because the coaching staff was going somewhere to support one of their players. And again, I know that's not the popular way to look at it, but that's the reality of what was going on there. Now, do I think Nick Saban's met with other recruits outside of that weekend? Yeah, I'm sure he has. But again, it's okay. So Nick Saban retired because he couldn't keep up with the new era of college football. But now that Alabama's recruiting at a high level, everyone's going, oh, well, Nick Saban's recruiting for him. Well, I thought y'all said that's why he retired, because he couldn't do it anymore.
Right.
Or he didn't want to. But now he's doing it again, but he's not the head coach, and kids are committing to a school to go play for somebody that doesn't work on the coaching staff.
Right.
So whatever. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. Some people are gonna take that stuff and run with it. It is what it is. But I did want to get your thoughts. I know you just kind of went through some of your thoughts on the recruiting stuff, but I particularly what we were talking about yesterday with a lot of our listeners, and that was what you heard from Hugh Freeze and John Cohen last week, essentially that they're recruiting the right way. Other schools maybe aren't recruiting the right way, and that's why Auburn is where they are in the recruiting rankings. And, you know, I guess we're all going to see in August when a lot of these deals fall through and then Auburn is able to go through and kind of have their pick of the litter recruiting-wise. Do you think that's a smart strategy, an interesting strategy? What kind of do you read from that? Because I feel like we had a lot of people yesterday. Some people were like, all right, let's give them time. Let's be optimistic, believe that they have a vision, a plan for this program. And then a lot of people say, man, this just sounds a little scary.
Right. Then tell me what the right way is. Or tell me who is doing it wrong so we can see, like, okay, well, what school is doing it necessarily the wrong way? Because if you're doing it the right way and you're sitting at the bottom of the barrel when it comes to recruiting, then what were you doing beforehand to get these great classes early on? Like, to me, it just doesn't make sense on if the messaging is this year is the make or break year for everybody. Like, if you put the emphasis on, we want to make sure the guys that we already have on campus, the guys that we already have, signed for however many years are going to be here, they're good. And just let people know that, hey, recruiting the numbers may be down, but we're looking more at the quality of the player that we're going to bring in. Again, it's easier said than done when you look across the other side of the state and it's 5-star from, Maryland, 5-star from Florida, 5-star from, name a state is going to Alabama. But when you see, like I said, it goes back to the optics. When you hear of a guy decommitting from Auburn to go to Kentucky, those are the ones that you're having question marks of, a 4-star receiver is going to Kentucky. Okay, we lost that one, but it's also very indicative of what this season has to be. Like, you can't be a middle-of-the-road SEC team. Like, the games, I even went back and watched a little bit because it was Missouri's day on the SEC network. It was the SEC takeover. The Missouri-Auburn game. Auburn was up 17-3 at one point in that game. And literally the fourth quarter, it just they just threw up on themselves. But how many of those games are we going to see this year where you have the control, you have everything that you need? Now, again, Peyton Thorne's gone. Also, Jarquez Hunter is gone out that backfield. Did you is Jackson Arnold going to step up and be adequate enough to not find themselves in those situations and have some of the same mistakes that Peyton did? Who knows? But it's still a question mark of the fact that, Jackson Arnold was benched at Oklahoma, the school that he wanted to go to. He was a 5-star coming out of high school. Great. That's all fine and dandy. But also, he didn't have the greatest of seasons. And now you're putting him in another situation, a new situation. Now, granted, a lot of his receivers were hurt. A lot of his weapons were down. He still found a way to beat Alabama. But now you're in a whole different environment where you've got a Hugh Freeze who is feeling the pressure. Because, again, it's a lot of these things over the summer weren't necessarily big, but it's because of what you had laid out the past 2 seasons on the field that's like, man, you don't need to – it just doesn't look right that you're out here golfing when, you got guys out here recruiting their tails off. Not to say that he wasn't, but it does kind of just give you an eerie feeling. But a lot of the pressure goes to what this season is going to be for Auburn, and it has to be successful. And if it's not, we're going to be at another conversation of, all right, are you going to give him another year or is he out the door? Because he's presented to you that, okay, yeah, he can recruit at a high level, but if it's not reflective of what's happening on the field, then it's all for nothing. Like, it's, okay, yeah, we're talented, but we're still sitting here at, 6-6 fighting for 7-5. So I think that the future, it's kind of eerie or grim because you haven't been presented with anything except that we can collect talent. We can't necessarily develop it at a high level that equates to wins on the football field.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that's spot on. And I think that's a lot of, the concerns, I guess, generally that you have going around the program. And I thought one of the things that Justin Hokanson said on Mac and Cube yesterday that I thought was really good was, and again, this isn't saying that, it's all doom and gloom necessarily, but when you're talking about right now with this class and why maybe it's a little concerning that you only have 6 or 7 guys committed right now is, if you, and basically the way he laid it out, right, is let's say you have a rough start to the season if you're Auburn and you're Hugh Freeze. If you already have guys that are committed to your program, it's probably going to be a little bit easier to, hey, a little bit of a rough patch. We're working through this. We want, this is why we need you here so you can come and be a part of that change. But if you don't have those guys already committed to you, or I guess in that arena, then if you have a rough start to the season, you're not getting guys, hey, do you want to consider Auburn now? And we're 2-3 to start the season or something. Along those lines, and then that's just going to create a whole nother situation. So I think that's where maybe some of the concern comes in, is that, again, yes, we all understand at this point, and if you don't, hopefully you do now, or you're hearing it for the first time, but yeah, these kids will commit in December, and that's when they will sign, and until that actually happens, who knows where these kids are actually going. But when you look at why the Alabama fans are so excited, it's because, do I think most of them expect that all 5 of their 5-star commitments are ultimately going to sign there in December? No, I think we all understand that there's a pretty good chance that at least 1 or 2 of those guys, if not even more, ultimately ends up somewhere else. But you already have them in the room. You have that line of communication with them. At some point, obviously, you were their number 1 choice, so you know how to kind of get back to there. And I think maybe that's kind of the difference of why you have the excitement from Alabama fans, with the understanding that this isn't solidified until December. It's, hey, we've already kind of got our foot in that door. So worst case scenario, we're just trying to get back to where we are right now. Whereas if you're Auburn, you're just trying to get people on your boat so that you feel like you have something to work with moving forward. So that'll continue to be the hot topic. I have to imagine up until at least the start of the season is just what's going to be going on with Auburn as we wait for August 1st, when a lot of these deals, I guess, can officially go through with the House settlement, and people have a better idea of what their financial situations will look like next year. And we will see if Hugh Freeze and John Cohen are the smartest men in college football, or if this, in fact, was a kind of a plan B scramble scenario that some people fear it is. And we'll be having some, interesting conversations about Auburn recruiting for the rest of the fall. So if you want to chime in with your thoughts on recruiting, what we had yesterday, 205-834-9450, that could get you on the courtesy GMC text line. I just wanted to get some of Damien's thoughts on that since he was out yesterday. But we do have some other things going on around college football, because we have media days coming up 6 days from now over in Atlanta, Georgia. And so this is when a lot of people start really getting into preview season. And there was a very interesting list that came out yesterday with some quarterback rankings in the SEC going into media days. And I think Damien is, especially with that shirt that he has on today, is certainly the person to get his thoughts on. So we'll dive into some SEC quarterback rankings as we continue marching ahead to SEC media days and college football season here on JOX. Welcome back into Morning JOX here on your Tuesday morning. Conrad Van Order, Damian Mitchell here with you until 7 o'clock when we hand you off to McElroy and Kublick in the morning. A couple of pieces of college football news to pass along to you real quick here before we get to some quarterback rankings here in the SEC. But if you missed it yesterday, Oklahoma AD Joe Castiglione has announced that he will retire during the upcoming school year. So this fall will be his final ride with Oklahoma football, as he was the longest tenured AD in the entire country, not just the SEC, but all of college athletics. Spent almost 30 years at Oklahoma. So a big change there for the Sooners heading into year 2 in the SEC. And I think, like probably a lot of people around college athletics, right, he wanted to see Oklahoma through their transition into the SEC and kind of looked around the rest of the landscape and said, man, I've been doing this for a while. Maybe time to do something else.
Yeah.
Just sit on a beach somewhere or something.
Yeah, and you look back at his accomplishments as Oklahoma athletic director, he's one of the best to do it, for sure. He's left a long legacy there at Oklahoma for it's gonna be tough sledding for the next person to come in, but also if you get a chance to be there for 30+ years and see the growth and, like you said, just transition into Oklahoma being, one of the best programs in anywhere in the nation, as far as, I mean, you not just in football, you look at softball and the run that they had with Patty Gasso, and I just think that just he can look back at his career and say, you know what, I gave it everything I possibly could, and if I left it like this, feel free to have at it the rest of the way. Like, it's on a solid foundation, to say the least.
Yeah, no doubt. He's gotten definitely his fair share of championships. Gotten in football, softball, like you said. There have been some really great basketball teams. I mean, some of the best basketball players or college basketball players of the last 25 years or so, with the Blake Griffins and Trae Youngs and Buddy Hields of the world and players like that. So yeah, he certainly had a heck of a run there at Oklahoma. So Joe Castiglione, the AD there for Oklahoma, he will be retiring during this upcoming school year for the Sooners. And you also had some news yesterday in the SEC that LSU has hired Ole Miss's coordinator of recruiting strategy, Kevin Bolden, to take over as the assistant GM there for LSU. So just a little bit of movement within the conference there. And, the joke I was making with somebody last night is, I guess his recruiting strategy was pretty bold. It was, hey, don't do it. Let's go to the portal. Like, that's...
Yeah.
Seems kind of like what he got paid to do at Ole Miss. Obviously, he did more than that, but it's just kind of funny. You hear recruiting strategy coordinator at Ole Miss, and you're going, sounds like he had a lot of free time lately. But he now takes over LSU in an assistant GM role, and we know how important that role has become in college athletics. So want to get to the SEC quarterback list that I was talking about. And so yesterday, we talked about this very briefly on three-man front, because there was one of these in particular that kind of stood out to us, and this comes courtesy of SEC Mike, that SEC podcast. You can hear him on three-man front later today on the 12 o'clock hour, on three-man front, as we will have him on to kind of go through some of this. But he put out his quarterback rankings for the SEC heading into SEC Media Days. And so I'm just going to run through these real quick for you, Damian, and then we can pick and choose a couple of these that I want to get your thoughts on in particular. So we'll start off at the top at number 1. A little bit different than a lot of other lists. Again, I don't really have a problem with it. I think you could certainly make a strong argument for this guy at number 1, but that would be Lenora Sellers from South Carolina at number 1. Number 2, he has DJ Lagway from Florida. Number 3, Garrett Nussmeier at LSU. Number 4, Taylon Green at Arkansas. Number 5, John Mateer at Oklahoma. Number 6, Arch Manning. Number 7, Gunnar Stockton at Georgia. Number 8, Austin Simmons at Ole Miss. 9, Marcel Reed, Texas A&M. 10, Ty Simpson at Alabama. 11, Joey Aguilar at Tennessee. 12, Diego Pavia, Vanderbilt. 13, Blake Shapen, Mississippi State. 14, Bo Pribula, Missouri. 15, Jackson Arnold at Auburn. And 16, Zach Calzada. I think we all agree that. We'll all agree on 16. Yeah, that's fine. But I just think that a different list than what we have seen from a lot of other places this preseason, Damian. And, we'll start at the top. I think again, maybe some people would have their order flipped around. I think a lot of people would have Arch higher, but I think, having Lagway and Lenora Sellers and Nussmeier up there at the top isn't going to surprise anybody. But I do think that having Taylon Green at number 4 over, really especially over Arch Manning, that'll turn some heads.
It will. And when it comes to the first 3 guys, and Lenora Sellers, DJ Lagway, Garrett Nussmeier, you can have an argument with all 3 of them. I'm not going to be opposed, because I do think the upside that DJ Lagway and Lenora Sellers have, it is light years ahead of where Garrett Nussmeier is, because the fact that they will run the ball, and will run the ball effectively if the play breaks down, as opposed to Garrett Nussmeier, because he does his arm talent. He truly believes he can make every throw on the football field. Now, is it ill-advised in some situations? 1,000%. I do think Taylon Green has a lot of juice. I really do. But it comes with the same issues I have with Garrett Nussmeier. He's known to turn the ball over at a pretty high rate, miss some pretty easy throws. But I do think the system that he plays in, it's very much geared towards him making the right decisions and having a lot of success. Now, granted, you can look at the supporting cast around him. It leaves a lot to be desired because he is at Arkansas. But I do think individually his talent you cannot deny. I would have him behind John Mateer. I would. And I would also have him below Arch Manning. I think Arch Manning, I don't look at him yet as like the end-all, be-all. The last name helps. He comes from a great pedigree when it comes to the quarterback position, but he also has not been that dude. And if the games that he has been, it's been, the Louisiana Monroes of the world. Like, it's the UTSAs. I saw when he had to come in against Georgia, and he looked like a young guy that has not seen a real defense across the field from him. I think it's early. I just think it's early. Like, you look at him against Georgia, and you look at DJ Lagway against Georgia, when both of them were both in similar situations where we weren't expected to be right here.
Looked a little different.
You see where it goes. The same with Austin Simmons. Austin Simmons went in for a drive, and it's like, wait a minute, Jackson Dart, you might not even have to come back into the game because I think this guy has he has not missed a beat on this offense. But I do think that having Jackson Arnold down at 15 is quite disrespectful. I really do, because there's nothing.
We're going to put the Penn State backup over him, who we haven't seen at all, just because
he's a Missouri?
Yeah.
No, I'm not having that discussion. I don't think that Jackson Arnold deserves to be down there. The question mark, the closer I get to the season, the more I kind of look back on it. The question mark I really have is with Diego Pavia. Because he had a lot of it goes back to what he was able to do against Alabama. Mm-hmm. And it kind of goes into the same situation with Zach Calzada when he was at Texas A&M. It's point me to the other games that Diego Pavia went out there and just absolutely hammered across the defense like he did against Alabama. Those are hard to find. They're hard to find. And I think the consistency for Diego Pavia is one thing. That's when we can say, he looked absolutely phenomenal against Alabama and even knocking off Auburn. He has some great moments. But he also turns the ball over. He also is very aggressive. He thinks that he is the Johnny Manziel of Nashville, Tennessee. But it doesn't equate to, consistently winning football games when he's kind of the issue in that situation. So I think that for him, being at 12 is maybe too low, but also don't expect him to be in the conversation of being the best at the position in the SEC either. So he's kind of like in that middle ground. I think Ty Simpson probably has the biggest leap out of everybody being at 10. It's okay, well, if he's a 10th best and Alabama goes out here and wins, 10, 11 games, a lot of it's going to be predicated on what he does at the quarterback position too. And again, when you look at the pieces that he has around him, he's going to look a lot better than what other people have at their programs. But I think individually that, for somebody that's waited this long and he's true, when you hear, Ryan Grubb, who has only been there for a couple months, say, like, if we started the game right now, he would be our starting quarterback, and we would feel 100% comfortable with him under center. That kind of gives me a little sense of, all right, well, they got that thing figured out. And another one to me is Marcel Reed. Marcel Reed, had the Texas A&M and Auburn game not happen, I would have so many more – I would be a little bit more optimistic than I was kind of this point last season. Because, again, he kind of got everybody by surprise when he had to jump in for Connor Wigman. Mm-hmm. And then you started to, put some real defensive tape against him. And it's like, okay, well, he's young. He has some upside. But he's also in that situation where realistically do we expect Texas A&M to be? Yeah. And how much of it is going to be because of what Marcel Reed does? So overall, the list is questionable, but it's not necessarily something that's just outright crazy besides just Jackson Arnold. I think Jackson Arnold is like the only one I'm like, come on now, Mike. Let's not be disrespectful. Let's look at everything else and just truly look at Jackson Arnold. If he was in a lot of these other places, he would be a lot higher.
Yeah, okay. And I think that's maybe why he's down there is that's, I don't know. I guess maybe that's SEC Mike's way of letting you know he's not very optimistic about what Auburn and Hugh Freeze are going to be capable of I guess putting around him or making use of him this fall. But no, I mean I agree. I think Jackson Arnold should definitely be a few spots higher. I think Taylon Green should be a few spots lower. But I will say this, and I probably would have him a little bit higher, I guess, but I do. I will respect the decision to not just have Arch Manning as, oh, well, he's the best quarterback in the SEC. Because like you said, look, I think Arch Manning's going to be really, really good. And who knows? At the end of the Ohio State game, he could go and throw for 400 yards and 5 touchdowns, and we're like, okay, yeah, this is it. This guy's going to win the Heisman and number 1 pick, and that's all she wrote, right? It is what it is. But, we've seen his 2 best performances are the 2 times that we've seen him on the field the most, where, I mean, no offense, but they were against Louisiana Monroe and Mississippi State. Like, okay, yeah, one was an SEC team, but, like, those were 2 not very good football programs last year, and that's what we've seen him. And you brought up the point of, what you saw a DJ Lagway do in a game against Georgia where, if he doesn't get hurt in that game, I think there's a lot of people out there that we've heard from that believe that, Florida wins that game over Georgia because that's how well he had that offense going when he was in the game. And, you see that from a true freshman, you just kind of go, wow, yeah, that's what I'm looking for. That guy has the juice, and I just don't think that Arch Manning's had that moment yet, and that doesn't mean that he's not going to have it this year, but, you look at what Lenora Sellers did last year, what DJ Lagway did when he came in the second half of the year. We all know what Garrett Nussmeier can do if he can just cut down on the interceptions. I mean, he's an all-world talent at quarterback, and but I do appreciate look, we all know Arch Manning's going to be pretty good. Texas is going to be pretty good, but let's wait and see how good he actually is before we just automatically assign him the best quarterback in the country. And again, everyone's entitled to their opinion, but when you hear Paul Feinbaum say he's going to be the best quarterback we've seen since Tim Tebow, like, what have you seen from him that makes you think that other than you just want a viral clip? Like, I'm sorry, but like, I just, that's the kind of stuff from people like Paul where you're just like, you're just saying stuff. Like,
come on,
you don't. I don't even think you believe it. You're just saying it. So we'll wait and see on a guy like Arch Manning. I think he's going to be very good, but having him at number 1 right now, I think is a little bit of overkill on some people's behalf. But I'm sure when we get to media days next week, there won't be an overbearing amount of love for Arch Manning in Texas, just like last year with Quinn and Sark when they acted like they ran the place in year 1. But to be fair, they did get to Atlanta, and they were the last team standing in the college football playoff. So that's a little reaction to some SEC quarterback rankings. You can weigh in with some of your thoughts, 205-834-9450, and we will get your reaction and continue the college football conversation next on Morning Jocks. .637, welcome back in to Morning Jocks here on JOX 94.5. Talking through some SEC quarterback rankings heading into the fall and heading into next week, where we have SEC Media Days. We'll be in Atlanta, Georgia, bringing you all the coverage here on JOX. And, I'm kind of curious in your opinion, Damian, because we will all get to vote. And that's one of the more interesting things I feel like a lot of times at Media Days is just you get kind of the consensus, and you're always going to have, we talk about on 3-man front sometimes, you got your people that vote for Vanderbilt to win the conference, right? And we all kind of know that that's probably not going to happen. But for you, in your opinion, when you look at how the media will vote at SEC Media Days in terms of the order of finish, are you thinking it's going to be Texas, Georgia, Alabama is going to be the top 3? Would you have it in that order? Do you think it's going to be different than that? Do you think there's going to be any surprises, I guess, from the media team in terms of a team that maybe they're like, oh, wow, I didn't, think they'd be that ranked that high?
Nah, I think the conversation to me will be between those 3, Texas, Georgia, Alabama. No matter which order that you put, I'll go ahead and straight up tell you, I think Alabama wins the SEC this year. I really do. I think that the momentum that they have in recruiting, and you could say that's next year's thing, but I think what this team is starting to get back to is very similar to what it was like when Nick Saban was there. Like, I think we had this conversation on Mac and Cube a couple weeks ago, and it's been weighing on my mind the past couple of weeks, just kind of piecing everything of what I think that the season will look like. But it's kind of keeping that same joyless murder ball identity, but not being afraid to hang 70 on you. Like,
Mhm.
it's no longer, we might not have to, Alabama might not have to necessarily go out and ground and pound, but you'll look up, and it's kind of very similar to how it was in 2020 when it's like, wait a minute, they just had a 3-play drive, and they're already in the end zone. Like, whoa, okay, now let's go see what we can do on the opposite end. And they go 3 and out. And I think Alabama's starting to get that fire back. And I think a lot of it last year was just because it was new. Last year was, this ain't it. This is not. These are the feelings that we do not want to have anymore. And I think now it's more of addition by subtraction. You don't necessarily have. I don't think Ty Simpson is going to go out there and make some of the same mistakes that Jalen Milroe had. Now, do I think he's the runner that Jalen Milroe is? No. But I think that the pieces that you have in that locker room and the pieces that are coming back, especially defensively, it's kind of all right, because you can honestly say, everybody can say, and granted, you can go to a couple games and say, things weren't where they needed to be, but they got better in Kane Womack's defense as the season
no doubt
got on. Like, it was okay. Now we know what our landmarks are. We know what we're looking for, and I think the pieces that you have coming back, they're important pieces to have. And I mean, Deontay Lawson went out against Oklahoma. Not to say that he was, necessarily the game thing, like the factor that changed everything. But I do think that his presence not being on the field definitely hurt you a little bit. Now, how is he going to be 100% come the fall? You expect so. Damani Jackson, you got to think, he didn't play into anything during the spring. And he was kind of that lockdown, rangy corner that you had. Keon Sabb coming back at 100%. I think, you look at all these pieces and it's like, okay, it's hard not to deny this fact. I think a lot of people are high on Texas. But also, again, my reservations are, is Arch Manning ready to take that mantle yet? Is it going to look like, the offensive production that you saw with Quinn Ewers? Are we going to see the consistency that you had been missing? But I do think that Alabama, Texas, and even Georgia, for an example, and again, I think Georgia is a lot more of, who are these guys? Are they, there's not the Jalen Carters, the Jordan Davises of the world, but they're still littered with talent. And also, again, Gunnar Stockton. I know he's tough. 1,000%. He's as tough as they come, but also, did they get everything right as far as the receiver room in the portal? Now, the names look great, but how are we going to get the ball to him? How is Mike Bobo going to dial these things up? Are they going to be able to run the ball like they have been in years past, where they kind of took a step back last year? So, I think LSU probably is going to be in that mix too. If they get,
I think they'll probably be the fourth,
right? And if it wouldn't be a surprise if they did jump up to third place or things, but a lot of things have to happen. But also, your defense has to get just 0.5% better, just a tad bit better. But I think that the cream of the crop, especially at the top, is kind of self-explanatory. Now, the middle of the pack is just where I have the most question marks of just, you could tell me that Oklahoma is going to be the 6th best team. You could give me an argument that Auburn, and you can give me Ole Miss. Like, it's the teams in that middle of the pack. How are they going to separate themselves? And even me as a voter, I got a gut feeling, but also, could South Carolina, have expectations but falter a little bit because they have expectations this year. So I think the middle of the pack is where I have the most question marks about the SEC as a whole.
I think that's fair. I think that's where a lot of people would go. And I think with, I'm interested, for example, where do people vote Auburn, right? Because, you talk about, that's a team where I think we all expect them to be better, but, how does, I guess, the general media outside of the state of Alabama that doesn't follow the program every day, what are their expectations for, the Auburns of the world? And I mean, you mentioned the teams like South Carolina and, some of those teams that are going to get a boost this year. And, does that make it where, there's some, you're talking about, Auburn's projected to finish 10th in the league and, 8th, 9th, 10th, something like that. And maybe Auburn fans don't like seeing that, but it's more so just the part of, man, these other programs like Vanderbilt and South Carolina, we didn't think they're going to be this good. And now we kind of got to figure out how to, manage all these teams and how we want to rank them. So I think it'll be very interesting in the middle of the pack, like you're talking about there, Damien, with just how, how the media kind of feels about that, because that's what differentiates the SEC from the other conferences, right? That's what we always hang our hat on is, at the top, the Big Ten and the SEC, I think, are pretty comparable. But once you get past those top 3 or 4 teams, that middle part, teams 5 through 11 or 12 in the SEC, I mean, that's, those teams right there could go and probably compete against the ACC and the Big 12 themselves, right? Just because that's how deep the middle parts of it are. So it'll be very interesting next week in Atlanta for SEC Media Days as we get to hear more of the media and what they think outside of the state of Alabama. Some of the people we don't talk to all the time, how do they view Alabama and Auburn heading in to the fall? But we see some of you on the phone line as well as the text line. Want to get to your reaction, some of your comments today on SEC quarterbacks, SEC Media Days, and recruiting. We'll get to all of that next on Morning Jocks. 6:49, welcome back in to Morning Jocks. Conrad and Damian here with you for a few more moments until we hand you off to McElroy and Kublik in the morning, as they will continue the college football discussion as we inch closer to SEC Media Days next week in Atlanta. And some of you have been waiting on the phone lines as well as the text line, so we want to give you the floor for the rest of the show. Get your thoughts on whatever's on your mind this morning around the college football landscape. So let's start off with our buddy Ron in Huntsville. How are we doing this morning, Ron?
All right, man. How you doing?
Doing well.
Tank guy going to sign with us? He could got a commitment date yet?
No, he doesn't have a commitment date yet. But over the weekend, he did say it's Alabama, Oregon, or Texas A&M. It's going to be one of those three.
Yeah. Well, just let Don know his Hugh Freeze from Auburn University is going to be fired at the end of the season. So I'm just going to let him know. He'll just make his day.
All right.
Have a good day.
Thank you, Ron.
All right, brother. Dang.
Man, that's
okay.
Appreciate the call, Ron.
Right. Okay.
He had short and sweet.
Yeah.
Don's catching strays from people he doesn't even know. Poor Don. Hope he's okay. Let's go to Deacon. How we doing this morning, Deacon? How's your hole going in your backyard?
Oh, that hole's getting bigger and bigger waiting on you, Conrad. You keep talking about Oklahoma like you do. Anyway, this call is I am the Deacon. I'm the self-appointed recruiting coordinator for all broadcast professionals. I'm calling for Mr. Damian Williams. Sir, I just want to tell you, Damian Mitchell, I'm sorry. You mess up doing that. In the era of NIL, I've only offered a onesie and Dreamland on game day. I'm up in the game, sir. You now will have my email, my personal information for any info you may need on being a Crimson Tide fan for the year that you're going to give us, if you so choose to do that. Now, after that year, like a proud papa, I'll let you walk on out and you'll either crush my heart or stay true to the Tide. But you'll at least have 1 year of true committed joy in being a Crimson Tide fan, and you'll have a lifelong Alabama football fan to guide you on your way. So the choice is yours.
Didn't you hear him earlier, Deacon? He said Alabama's going to win the SEC this year. So
he did. I'd already left work and I damn near passed out going down the interstate. I was like, what did he just say? Wait a minute. A Tennessee ball just said that Alabama was going to win the SEC, and a dyed-in-the-wool Alabama fan has got an Oklahoma bobblehead riding down his car. It breaks my heart and makes me proud all at the same time, fellas. Y'all have a great day.
Oh, thank you, Deacon. Appreciate you. Appreciate you chiming in this morning. So I'm trying to refresh the timeline here. So did you say after Media Days you were going to cut down your list to 5 schools?
Yes, sir. The Friday after Media Day. So once I've heard all the coaches speak, particularly my top 10, I want to hear what they have and just their expectations and how everything's going. And I'll make my decision. I'll narrow it down to 5. And I'll announce it on that Friday.
So is it safe to say that Alabama is going to be in the top 5 since you picked them to win the SEC?
Sure.
It would just be interesting if you picked them to win it and then it'd be, honestly, I would respect that a lot, that you pick them to win and then you say, oh, I'm not going to root for them. You want to go for the underdog.
Nah, there's a strong possibility they could be in my top 5. Okay. But right now they're in the top 10 for sure.
Okay, well, we will find out next Friday, I suppose. But I think we have some texts coming in this morning as well, Damian. So why don't we finish up with some text from our wonderful listeners?
Yeah, of course, going back to what SEC Mike has in his top quarterbacks in the SEC. Mm-hmm. Somebody texted in and says Aguilar ahead of Pavia. That is a joke. And Brad
interesting one.
is a jackal, not a journalist. Going back to the Auburn recruiting side of things, somebody texts in and says Auburn's going to surprise everybody when they win almost 11 games.
So 10 games.
So right,
would that be almost 11 games?
That's kind of how I look at it too.
Okay, that would be a surprise. That would be impressive.
Yeah. Drake texts in. We know he's a Florida fan. He says Auburn thinks recruiting is bad. Now all I can say is that they better not lose the Baylor game.
That game is getting more and more important every day that goes by, it seems. Yep.
Yeah. Your buddy Don Don, he texts in. He says, "Good morning, guys. Jackson Arnold is going to prove everyone wrong and be a top 5 quarterback in the SEC. Also, my season prediction is 9-3 this year for my Auburn Tigers."
Okay. Top 5 would be, yeah, Jackson Arnold's a top 5 quarterback in the SEC. You probably are 9-3 or 10-2.
Yeah. And Jason texts in. He says, "Is Auburn's recruiting headquarters at Topgolf?" Some jokes just write themselves. Somebody texted in from the state of West Virginia. It says, "Not in on much of the Arch hype, but want to believe in Jackson Arnold. No way. Auburn is a joke who will never get close to the playoffs. Not everyone who turns on the radio wants to hear about Auburn football all morning. Never heard someone talk so much about a 5-win team."
Well, we are a radio show in Birmingham, Alabama. So we're going to talk a lot about Alabama and Auburn.
Yeah.
Shocker.
And somebody says, and he also says, what was the SEC and Big Ten record against each other? Exactly. Shut your stupid mouth. Sweet Jesus. He woke up and chose violence.
I'll be honest, don't know what it was off the top of my head. Ohio State beat Texas. Let's see, Illinois beat South Carolina. I think Michigan beat Alabama. I think I know what path that they're going there, but don't think they trying to argue that top to bottom the Big Ten's better than the SEC, because we know that that's not true. But you have been at the top the last couple of years. You have had the best team and champions, so congratulations on that. We'll see how this year goes. But that does it for us. We'll be back tomorrow at 6 a.m. McElroy and Kubik in the morning. They're next.